Hello and welcome. This is the Stop, Reflect, Verify podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kaigwa. I'm the founder and team leader at StopReflectVerify.com, the misinformation quiz that challenges you and helps you if you've ever been shamed into sharing, fooled into forwarding, or tricked by the trending topics on social media. I'm excited in this episode to have a very special guest. I have Alphonce Shiundu, the Kenya editor at AfricaCheck, a non-profit fact-checking organization working all over the continent. And he and I are going to talk about misinformation, disinformation, and the differences between the 2017 general election and the 2022 general election in Kenya. Stick around and follow the conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. Alphonse, thank you for coming through. Thank you for being here. Right off the bat, I'm going to start off with a question for you. How do you explain what you do to your parents or to someone who is retired? Go.
We start from what they know. So they know who a journalist is. And so we say we are journalists, but our job is just to listen to what public figures say and say whether it's true or not. That is the simpler version. Now, there are those who would ask, then what do you do on social media? And then we tell them, on social media, our job is to just track the content, see what is true or not, and tell you why you should not believe something that you're seeing trending or something that has been forwarded to you. So for for some, that might look like it's not. It's a bit much more complicated, but the bottom line is we are here to tell you what the truth is.
Exactly. And I think you do some really special and important work at AfricaCheck, and I've long been an admirer, I think, of yourself, the team, and everything you and the organization there do. So if we change the spotlight to looking at the misinformation now, between clickbait, let's say, from publishers, so these are websites that are distributing misinformation on social media, and an everyday person who then gets an image and shares it in their personal capacity. Do you see any differences with the spread? Meaning, is it a Facebook page or group of a publisher that's going to go really far, or is it the everyday person sharing their opinion in this case, but in that case, they've fallen for misinformation? Any contrasts or differences there you found?
So what I see is we are now very big on social media. Like the people who peddle false information, it's no longer about what the clickbaitish websites and blogs. So even as they put that false information there, they have found a way to truncate it, to summarize it into tiny infographics that they then put on social media. And social media has all these tools working in the background to power how information spreads, to power engagement on those platforms. So we find that misinformation often travels on social media, even when it's on a blog or on these clickbaitish websites. They take, those who want to spread it, they take screenshots and then they send it on social media. So you find a screenshot on Twitter, a screenshot on WhatsApp, and a screenshot on Facebook of a website that is spreading false information. So if you're going to check, you would go to the root and work your way upwards. So sometimes you find, yes, it's a clickbaitish website, it's a satirical website, and some of them are just set up to just put out misinformation. So there are all those nuances to the spread of misinformation, but you have to, if you have to say, is it the clickbait websites or the blogs or the social media? I would say social media does the spread of misinformation and disinformation much, much better than the blogs would ever do.
And that's a powerful thing to consider, because I think as a fact checker, something that I've noticed, and I'd love to get your view on this, is that both the fact checker and the false news creator both have a common ally, which is the graphic designer. So I'd love for you maybe to speak to that, because I hadn't really thought of this, but it is quite true. The screenshot. So I'm not just sharing your tweet. I'm sharing a screenshot, and then at some point it might not be a screenshot of a real tweet, which is very meta, but the pardon the pun, no pun intended. But the question for me would be the role, or how you can contrast 2017, that social media cycle, with the elections, and 2022 in Kenya, and how visuals or graphic design are playing a role in how misinformation is spreading or trending. Because even I hadn't thought of it, but screenshots are there too.
Yeah. So the first part of your question where you asked, I was having a chat on Sunday with a friend from Zimbabwe. And his argument, like every time we meet, he says, you exist because the people creating and spreading false information exist.
Right.
And I was telling them, yes, there is that, because misinformation is not going anywhere. And we cannot just sit back and not do something about it. So he's had this argument that doing fact checking is not going to do much damage on false information. And what we tell him is that fact checking is just one of the things that need to be done. The second thing that needs to be done is media literacy. So what you're doing is you fact checking public figures, because when these people spread misinformation, disinformation, it has huge reach because of the automatic credibility that they have, legitimized by sort of their office and their titles or their money. So there is that aspect. And we have learned since 2017. When we started, we were just fact-checking public figures. And we checked for public figures, and we realized there is some sort of misinformation that is circulating on social media that we were not checking, and it was equally damaging. So in 2018, we made a move to start fact-checking on social media, not just Meta, Facebook. It was also on Twitter and on WhatsApp. So we were doing the fact-checking on those platforms. We see a false photo, we find a way to fact-check it and publish and tell people. So graphics are big. The screenshots that you just mentioned, big. Videos, a lot of what we are seeing right now is what we saw towards the last week of 2017, if you remember, when there were those shallow fakes of news broadcasts for CNN and BBC. So right now, we have shallow fakes from political rallies.
I might even just pause there. You want to tell people what a shallow fake is? Because there is a deep fake. Right, stay with us, guys. There's a deep fake and there's a shallow fake. And just so people know what it is, so they can spot it, why don't you break down what either one is? So,
we think of shallow fakes as stuff that is not really intelligent. Like you can spot it if you just keen, if you ask yourselves questions. It's just stuff you can see. But the deep fake, on the other hand, does not allow you to think otherwise. Like you see it, all your cognitive tools or signals that tell you whether something is true or not, they do not. There is no alarm going ding 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 in your mind. All you're seeing is something and you're like, oh, this must be true, because your mind cannot reconcile this could be fake. But with shallow fakes, you will see, and then something will be like, could he? Or is it true? So those are the things. So what we are seeing right now, it's political rallies where somebody takes, for example, for the Kenyan audience, they would know somebody like Atwoli. He's at a rally. He's Azimio la Umoja supporting Raila. So he speaks and he says, mutapigia nani kura? So he's asking the crowd. And the response is Ruto. And then, so guys are looking at that and you're like, wow, okay. But when you listen again, he wouldn't ask it multiple times if he was getting a hostile answer. So shortly, but now Kenyans have the tools. So every time there is a shallow fake, just scroll down the comments, you will find the authentic video of the thing. So that is one of the things that we are happy about, because people have over time gained the skills to do the fact checking for themselves. And that's one of the things that, like, as fact checkers, we have been doing for the last 6 years.
Right. And I think just to also break it down a bit further, so a deep fake would be somebody takes my face, my likeness, and then uses artificial intelligence to both mirror the sound of my voice. And especially for public figures, there's hundreds of hours of their voice. So they hear their intonations and all of their sort of their basically these idiosyncrasies, these small tics and ways that they express themselves. And then you're able to record using a webcam, as that's typically a lot of deepfakes are, as Mark will now act as Alphonse.
Yes.
If I've been studying Alphonse long enough, I can get the sounds to match, or I can get a voice impersonator or actor. And then I can basically give Alphonse his resignation as Kenya editor at AfricaCheck and light the world on fire. And
On
say
video.
That, yeah, right? And on video. And so
Yes.
people are looking and saying, man, is this Alphonse really? So those are deep fakes. And then, like you said, shallow fakes, for me, a great way to describe and consider them is editing things even out of context. So there was the Nairobi gubernatorial debate the other day, and I was like, people are really quick, because somebody had had basically gone and cherry picked like exact sentences and phrases and put together this video. I won't go into the details of it, but it was an example of a shallow fake in that that's clearly not what was said, not in the order it was said, but you get the cuts and you time them just right. And you're like, wow, okay, like this is disparaging the other side or energizing the base, which are some of the motivations for people. So to your point, we're getting in a world where you might distrust things because it's not only is it, you think it's the person saying that, you're like, oh, I knew that all along, but it's AI on this side, it's edited. And you gave this example, which I think is valuable. In 2017, 2018, people would go and pretend to be CNN, pretend to be the BBC, pretend to be Global, CGTN or CCTV formerly, and present these stories. And it was oftentimes the lower third that would give it away, because you're like, that's not the BBC font, that's not the CNN font.
Yes.
But the piece was actually pretty well edited and put together. So like we're saying here, the graphic designer is both the ally of the fact checker to say false, to call it out. And then they're also the sort of the antagonists, because they typically are involved in making a lot of the false news and misinformation content. I want to take us a step back and
just before there's this example that was very strange. We'd never seen it, and this is like a big difference, where a whole manifesto, like 30 pages, was designed professionally with the branding and like everything was matching. Yes, it's only the content which was off. So, and it's the timing also, when they sent it, when they put it out, and how it was seeded.
For clarification, this is a fake manifesto.
It's a fake manifesto.
But that looks real and is launched at the same time as the real one.
Before. It sort of scoops it's launched on the morning of when the real manifesto is going to be launched. And the way it's seeded, it's just on WhatsApp. In the WhatsApp groups.
Right.
When you check Facebook, you don't see. On Twitter, you're seeing, what do we call these, screenshots of very angry people at some of the proposals, and a lot of people like throwing shade at the manifesto. And so that is not something we had seen in 2017. Right now, we're seeing a lot of thought in the way people are just creating and putting out false information.
Yeah, and so what I'd love to do, even just building on that, is take us a little bit behind and just sort of lay a bit of a foundation for what we'll discuss. So when you're asked, and I think you gave a great expression of what it is you do as a job, but when you're classifying misinformation, now there's disinformation, and we've even evolved to where we have malinformation. What's the sort of layman's understanding of how you set the scene to describe those, or at least just shed light so people can follow with what we're speaking on?
So when we talk about misinformation, is something that has been shared which is false or misleading, and you do not know that it's false or misleading. And so you're sharing it, believing either it's true or you want to help someone. And we see a lot of this with health misinformation. So during COVID-19, we all did the ginger, lemon, and honey, the concoction, because we were thinking it's going to give us some kind of boost, some kind of immunity, because that's what people were saying. Disinformation, on the other hand, is I know it's false and I want to deceive you. So I'm putting out this information to make sure that I mislead you into not knowing what's true, or into having doubts about what the facts are in reality. Now, the last thing is malinformation. So malinformation, basically, it's true information, but you're not meant to see it. It's not for your eyes. So we classify things like leaks. So if I leak a confidential secret letter, that's malinformation. If I leak nudes, that is malinformation. So that's the kind of so when we're talking misinformation, disinformation, and that, so there is an element of intent and there is an element of context. So those are the things through which we classify. But somebody will ask you, then how about political propaganda?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and political propaganda can transcend all those things. So when Dirakshan and I think Claire Waddle were coming up with this nomenclature in 2017, they put all those details down, and you can see it's not strictly has to be mis-dismal. It can be mixed, and that's the nature of propaganda. We're using facts in different contexts. Most of them, some of the things that they put false, but they are just creating a misleading narrative.
I think sometimes, like, part of the reason Stop, Reflect, Verify exists, and we look at our role in using evidence and research to evaluate what has AfricaCheck published, what have other fact checkers published, what have sort of been the key places people have tripped up or been repeated pitfalls. So gathering that evidence and then using sort of, I guess, like I'd say, like our marketing and you might say behavior optimization or behavior change. I mean, some people look at marketing that way, using those skills to then say, look, how do I create some kind of intervention, right? Because for us, there's a gap that exists. The gap on this side is there's misinformation, there's facts, and then on this far end, there's fact checks. And, we have this graphic. It's more of like a sketch that I made where I'm like, the misinformation travels and gets very high reach and then begins to taper off. And then that's when the fact check comes. And there's still somewhat of a gap. The distribution and reach of the fact check almost never matches the misinformation, and certainly doesn't always reach the same people. Mm-hmm. So to me, I feel like our job at Stop, Reflect, Verify has been to shine a light on fact checkers, shine a light on the fact that these websites exist and this content is there, and then build up some kind of appetite to test one's knowledge, hopefully find some pitfalls. So by taking the quiz on the website and looking at our blog and consuming this podcast, you get the chance to be a little smarter or sharper. Like we said, you won't get fooled into forwarding, shamed into sharing, or be tricked by the trends. But I say all of that so that when I think about a fact check, I don't think people fully understand what it takes to do what you and your team do. And I almost want to give you a bit of a stage to just say, because look, for me, it's kind of easy. Like, we will come in, sum up your great 1,000-word fact check in a snazzy headline, a tough set of options, built at Stop, Reflect, Verify to trip someone up. And then the answers, again, in a few words, and then down there say AfricaCheck. But meanwhile, there is a really dense and well-researched and balanced piece that is in response to that screenshot, to that one visual. So talk a bit about the fact-checking process and how one of these articles is created, because I think people would appreciate to know that and the kind of regard to hold it in.
Well, okay, thank you for the stage. But when we see what you do at Stop, Reflect, Verify, tripping people up with very important questions and signals on what to check, how to detect false information. Like, we love that. So keep doing it. Now, the next thing I would want to say is, when it comes to fact checking, a lot of, like, every conversation I have with policymakers and with public figures about what we do often ends up with, when Mark says this, I am there, I tell him, Mark, no, that's not true. So you see things like when Wajakoya, the presidential candidate for Roots Party, stood up, like, he's been going around with this marijuana manifesto thing. And we're sitting there. So a lot of people are sending clips to us and they're asking, you mean marijuana can be 3.2 million a sack? And we have land, we have rain, we have the sun. And why are we not growing it? We are crying about debt. And you're thinking, are you guys, like, really serious? You want a fact check on this? And they are like, yeah, we have to know whether it's a viable option for public finance, for raising money, for raising revenue for the country. And so we start checking that. So the process is just very simple. You see a claim, we sit down and we say, okay, because in the beginning we were like, what's the real harm that this is going to cause? Because he's a fringe candidate, the support is not there, like, big time. So we are like, what's the harm this is going to cause? So, but when we saw a lot of, like, he's going to media stations, he's being taken seriously, headlines are being written about how he's going to change. And we were like, wait a minute. Let us have a conversation with people who have studied marijuana legalization, people who know the marijuana market, and people who have, like, been in spaces where marijuana has been the debate for fiscal incentive, for, like, financial motive for growing marijuana has been done. So we reached out to professors, most of them in the US and Canada, who have written books, written papers, studied this thing for years. And they were very open. They, like, have all this data, and Canada has legalized marijuana, but although there are very strict measures to do that. And their statistics agency, the equivalent of our statistics agency, has all this data about how much has been sold, how much comes in from marijuana. And when you look at the data and you look at the figures Wajakoya is speaking about, there's a problem. But the basic thing is, he talked about special sacks. He did not say how big they are. He just said the price. And so we put this question, and it sounded like those guys were like, special sacks for, like, how do you mean? And we did the math with them, and they were like, okay, let's take him at he says it's $3.2 million for a sack of marijuana. Good. So how many kilos would that be at the current prices?
Right.
And then you find it is about 2 tons of marijuana that would cost that much.
Wow.
At current prices. So is there, marijuana, the way it's bulky, now, is there a sack that can feed 2 tons of marijuana? Like, if you imagine 2 tons, like, that is 2,000 kilos, it's like 2 million grams. That's pretty massive. It's massive. So those are some of the things. So you've seen we found the claim, interrogated the value of fact-checking it, and fact-checked it, asked people who understand the trade for context, people who have studied. So we were not looking for a soundbite or just somebody to give us a voice. We had 2 hours of interviews with some on just that one specific question. And we had to look through all the angles. And then in the end, we come to a verdict. So there are other things that he says. So when he says, oh, Rwanda has legalized, we talk to the people in Rwanda, we talk to the government of Rwanda, and they sent us data and papers and legal briefs of what they did. And it's nothing like marijuana is still illegal in Rwanda. Oh. He mentioned South Africa. We have a South African office, so we could get the court decisions of what that happens. It's still illegal in South Africa. You can do it in private, but never in public. So when we think about what he said, that's the whole fact-checking process. So when somebody says they want a popcorn fact-check, we don't do that. We try to just make sure that we take a lot of time, because we cannot afford to be wrong. We have to get it right. So we'd rather take all the time so that if we're giving you the facts, it's something you can rely on to make a decision.
That's right. And I think I've seen and long admired just the way you go through, and somebody can say a claim that is literally just 7 to 10 words long, but the response and the level of depth you have to go into, if you go to the AfricaCheck website, and obviously I encourage everybody to visit it, africacheck.org, you'll see anything from political promises being tracked to finance and sort of economics being unpacked, all the way down, like you said, to just a single statement on a price. And you have to have these cross-continental calls just to definitively say it's misleading, it's inaccurate, it's incorrect, it's hard. I guess there's basically a spectrum on the website that I think does such a good job. So I want to shift gears a bit and look to Twitter. Now at Nendo, and with the rest of what we do, we've always held Twitter in a really unique place. I consider it to be somewhat more elite, in the sense that it's not every social media's cup of tea, every social media user's cup of tea, I should say. And so to that extent, Facebook has 15 million Kenyans on it, by far the biggest social network. Twitter, at best, I would say it's sitting anywhere between 3 and 5 monthly active users. That's just my guesstimate. They don't give numbers, Facebook do. But the impact, especially of screenshots of the trending topics list. So I have a working theory I want to sound you out on, which is that one of the things in Nendo's trend report from 2021 we put out was that if you're looking for information on Twitter, the behavior of most Kenyans who publish, why? Because the majority of Kenyans don't actually publish on Twitter. They visit the website, but they don't actually tweet. They consume tweets. Mm-hmm. But for the people who do post, some of the loudest, some of the people who post to the highest volume, right, meaning dozens of tweets an hour, hundreds of tweets a day, for example, are using every single keyword in the trending topics list and doing what we call trend jacking, meaning I have a laptop to sell on the 3rd floor, room 6B at Timenti House, downtown Nairobi. And guess what, man? I'm going to keep every single hashtag you can imagine, every single one of the 20 trending topics. And what that does, it makes it harder to find information. But on the flip side, you now have another set of people who I would call the thumbs for hire. And thumbs for hire here is what I would call, with the most respect, pretty well-meaning Kenyans, at least from the ones that I've met, who are what you'd expect. The way there was, crowds for hire, for a political rally, there's thumbs for hire for the trending topics. But in between the two, I find it quite hard to pick out the actual information. I was looking at, I forget, it's like the debates. And I'm literally scrolling through the first 20-something odd tweets and cannot find a single relevant in-the-moment update, right? I'm having to go to some lens. I mean, what's your view on just how between trend jackers who are sharing basically their own message and muddying up the trending topics, and thumbs for hire who are basically doing pro this, anti that, and basically this exchange of, not fire, but exchange of tweets back and forth? I mean, when people are genuinely trying to wake up and get a bit of the news and the information and something valuable from Twitter, how difficult is it to fact check, or generally to know where to pay your attention in your view for Twitter?
That's exactly like how information pollution operates. Like the whole point is you should make it very difficult for people to find accurate information. So that's the headache. That's something that keeps us awake at night. Now, this thumbs for hire, the people who get hired to pollute that environment, we see them. And we're like, how do we make people understand how Twitter operates? Because these few people, there is a very loud minority on Twitter, and there is a very silent majority, the ones who their job is just to look at the tweets and retweet and like and jump on on a highly trending or a highly retweeted tweet and just join the conversation without knowing what is happening. And so my sense is that it would be much easier if we get accurate information on Twitter. And we have, for these elections, we've been chatting with Twitter just to get the conversation going on how we can put accurate information, amplify it on the platform so that it's easier. So if you go to, like, if you're in Kenya and you're looking for information on elections, you're likely to find these moments on Twitter,
Yes.
where with links to credible organizations, AfricaCheck and other fact checkers there, so that you can know what's true and what's not. So those are some of the steps we're taking. But we've raised this the trend jacking thing, and it's like there's not much they can do right now, but it's a conversation that we would love to continue with them so that they understand where we're coming from. So if it's about the presidential debate, what's the picture of a shoe showing there? Like what's a shirt or jeans showing in that app? They mentioned the cost of living, or why you put, how related are they? So it's a conversation that we are having, and we hope that we will continue after the elections just to figure out how to make that how make the platform, and not just Twitter, the other platforms also, or to work to make the information ecosystem less polluted.
Yeah, and in terms of misinformation, the wages of sharing misinformation is what I'd call the shadow ban. Can you just briefly unpack what the consequences are and what platforms they exist on? And I say shadow ban in quotes. It's just more about what happens when people frequently share misinformation, and then we'll also get to some steps people can take when they encounter it in the wild. But I'd love to hear for you on the fact checking side. What have you seen as some of the consequences being put out for users who either frequently share or in some cases get misled and share it, but in some cases they didn't know they were passing on misleading information?
So at some point last year and early this year, we rolled out a project which we called Fact Ambassadors. So what we were trying to do with that is to get users to tell other users that this is true and this isn't, just by looking at our fact checks, and they would look at the information online and say, so it's peers advising each other on what's correct and what's not. Now, from that point, what's to come to your question, we learned, and it's a case that was shared with us by one of the fact ambassadors, that there is a teacher who was supposed to get vaccinated. But then they saw all these claims about infertility associated with vaccines. And she sat back and she was like, no, that's not my problem. And she was supposed to travel, I think. And she was almost postponing the travel. But when she started looking into the things, because the more you look through some content, the more of it you get. So she was like getting deeper and deeper into the conspiracy hole. So she put it on a WhatsApp group, which one of our fact ambassadors was in. And the fact ambassador just responded that this is false and sent all these links that we had sent with the correct advice. So people get misled and they can take harmful decisions about their healthcare. Then there are also those who lose money, land.
Job scams.
People lose like their incomes in this tough economy.
Or even human trafficking. I know the first version of the Stop, Reflect, Verify podcast, we were trying to help people understand not all of these opportunities, let's say in the Middle East or overseas, are what they appear to be.
Yeah.
And some of these things just keep popping up. Like if it's a Google form and you need to pay money to be considered for an interview or for to travel overseas for work. I mean, I was talking to somebody, who had said that there were people who had flown into Kenya, gone with their bags, down to the Masai Mara to one of the gates. We're talking about people with essentially almost like a one-way ticket.
Yes.
And they're being told no such hotel exists. And we are really sorry, but people cannot just walk into the national park. There's wild animals in there. But I mean, it's absolutely disastrous. Just some, and heinous, just what people are doing with some of this misinformation, these scams.
Yeah.
And part of them is playing on to the fears, the hopes, the people who are essentially job seekers here and following the pandemic trying to find work.
Yeah, with the elections, we're seeing a lot of political smearing, which is just like terrible. And with the with the social media platforms themselves, what we're seeing is some people, the circulation is usually suspended. If you are a frequent peddler of false information, so the posts can be suspended. If you're violating their community rules, they will warn you and just kick you out. But a lot of people who have spread false information, whose posts have been downgraded, whose pages visibility has gone down, some of them just create fresh pages, understand the way fact checkers or the algorithms work to identify, and then they adapt accordingly.
Wow.
So like somebody can share a fake job. There's one which has been going around since 2020. It is shared in a public group, but the way it is shared, the privacy settings have changed so that I'm sharing it with 10,000 people, but I say except Mark. So like we only check public posts. So for them, that's 9,999 people will see it.
Wow.
But we, as fact checkers, there is really nothing much we can do about it. So those are some of the things that we have to like discuss. Okay, we want to check public things, but also people are becoming smarter by understanding what we are doing and adapting accordingly so that their misinformation stays online.
I mean, I had no idea that was happening. That's actually kind of that's really crazy to me. So another question as we bring the plane into land, the question of a gender angle. So at Nendo, we've just finished some research around female political figures and prominent women in the public square, as it were, and the types of disinformation, misinformation, and in many cases, cyber harassment, cyber abuse, misogyny, and other types of attacks of their character and, these unfair or unequal standards that get imposed on them. I'm curious if you've seen anything from a gender angle. I can imagine, you're looking at everything, but at least for us, we encountered quite a bit of instances where, women are held to not only just an unfair standard, but on top of that, the types of attacks they have to endure just by being online, just by being, people who host the news or are in prominent, parts of the public service or society. So curious if there's a gender angle you've ever encountered within this, within your work.
Yeah. It's interesting. You are looking at it, and we were also looking at it for an article we were doing for Fumbua. So my colleague and I, we wanted to talk about gendered misinformation, disinformation. And when we started writing the article and discussing the points, and speaking to the experts, we realized that it's when you start talking gendered misinformation, disinformation, you end up looking at cyberbullying, harassment, trolling, and all that. So it's almost impossible because when you just look at the presidential debate yesterday, it's done. The questions, people did not like a question by one of the female anchors. They also did not like a question by the male anchor. But all you're seeing, it's the female anchor being attacked for her sexuality, but the male anchor is being attacked for his intellect. So they are focusing on the agenda on one, but they are going below the belt on the other. So it's the stuff that we have seen, and the experts were telling us that it's not new. It's just right now, because of, they mentioned patriarchy, stereotypes, and inequality, this attacks, sexualized attacks on women used to happen in the rallies. But right now, every rally has a smartphone. So every abuse, minor, however vulgar, there is no what gatekeeping. It goes online and it reaches women in their, like, you are in your home with your phone, like in the most private, you want to chill, you want to like sleep, you're just browsing your phone, and then a video pops up. It's your nude pictures, all of them photoshopped, and an audio clip saying how you slept with so and so and so and so. So they cause very, very bad damage, say, to their mental health, to their self-esteem, to their confidence, and even influence how women participate in politics, because a lot of this is used to intimidate and push women off of politics. So that's one of the things that we are seeing, and women participation is something that Kenya is trying to move through. But when you find a lot of misinformation and that turns into bullying and trolling, that then kicks them out, that's something that requires urgent attention.
Exactly. And I think one other angle I'm curious is what differences you've noticed in what I'd call the generational divide. And I am not a fan. And to an extent, I'll actually go out and say, I don't believe that Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z actually apply in Africa and specifically Kenya. And I literally gave a TEDx talk on that like maybe 6 years ago. But for argument's sake, let's take the analogy and ask for Generation X, people who, they wrote handwritten letters and they went to call boxes at a certain time to pick up a call, because that's how it worked back then. And if you said you're going to meet me downtown at 2 p.m., you better be there because basically we agreed this a month ago, yes. Right? Or I'm taking a bus up country to come meet you. So that generation and how they shared, misinformation or disinformation. And then there's Gen Y, right? Who I would say used cyber cafes, had a SIM card, not to age myself, but maybe had the SIM card in the metal CD container. That's definitely aging myself. And then Gen Z right now, where they don't know a world without M-Pesa, right? Because M-Pesa has been around 15 plus years. And for them, generally, the mobile internet is like, it's like having a pulse. And I say that mainly talking about urban people in this case, but do you see generational differences or nuances in how people share or spread misinformation, and what would be your view on what that looks like in Kenya?
There is a hesitancy, and there's a hesitancy among the older generation into believing what they see. So most of them would either ask their young people, I've seen this on the internet, is this true or not? But if it's the young person sending it to the older generation, then they tend, because some of them did not go to school, but they took their children all the way to university. So they trust that the education they gave you would help you, like, give them the facts, verify information. So if you're the one forwarding false information to them, they will bite it like it's true. Now, that's the problem with that part on how misinformation travels from one generation to another. The only thing I have to worry about is the attention economy for the younger generation. So, and you see it when you're dealing with them, doing trainings with them. If you're not you've not put games in the training, you're not using audiovisual. Nobody is going to train. So that's the way we work. So they would still share misinformation because and screenshots work for the merchants of false information. Screenshots are good for that generation because they have no time to go check the Twitter. They will just forward what they see. Fake front pages, perfect, because they don't buy newspapers. And we have paywalls in some of these newspapers. So for them, they will look at fake front page. It's legit, and they will share it. So for the younger people who are online, maybe some of them do not have the presence of mind to understand how these platforms operate. And for the older people, they are always skeptical about the things they see. So some of them you'll hear, I have to find the newspaper for today. So they will call, you'll find an old man calling you at 8 a.m. Hi, how are you? Have you bought today's paper? And you're like, yeah, can you send me a picture of the front page? So, and then there is the cross-border nature of false information. So you find young people in Uganda are having a conversation about Museveni and some headline there. And that is shared in Kenya without context. And so that misinformation, it's trending, yes, because of the young people love a good fight on social media. But then a lot of it ends up building a misleading narrative about their understanding of the politics of Uganda or what ticks in Uganda. So those are some of the things that we see across generations. And we think, like, if you're going to fight it or if you're going to try to educate the generations, you have to put some of these educational tools that will make it easier for them and interesting for them. Because fact-checking, when we're doing training on fact-checking, it's very cerebral in its nature. So you have to break it down, make it interesting, make it fun. And I think that's why we value the work that you do at Stop, Reflect, Verify, because somebody will read the question, they will do the answer, and then they will be curious, did I get it right or not? And then they will see the explanation down there. And then you give them more time to go through the same questions, and you link them to the fact checkers so that they can see this is how it is done and this is why it is wrong. So that's one of the beautiful things, and I think you should just like keep them coming and alerting them that this exists.
Thank you. So as we wind up, what would you say are some practical ways people can become almost fact ambassadors? So how can they stop, reflect, and verify? I mean, Twitter has what we call the Twitter rules. Facebook has community standards. TikTok, I believe, is coming up with its own expression of this. What is the sort of the way you have people take the first step to not just be passive consumers or spreaders of misinfo?
Okay, the first thing we say is you see a bit of information, whether a picture, whether a video, whether a post on Facebook, and all you need to do is ask, how does Mark know? Like, how would he know? Why would he post this? Yeah, like it's just basic. Like, so if I say there is an accident in Garissa right now, and I post a picture, like am I have I ever posted other pictures from Garissa? How is it that I have this picture of a fresh accident? And is there any other person? Because an accident, people have smartphones. They will show up. They'll take more pictures. So are there other pictures? There's a great example where, like, just asking that question would have solved the problem. So there is this. There was a fuel crisis, and then there is a electric bus that was being launched in Kenya. And so somebody takes, like, as it's being launched, I don't know how that was being sponsored. Somebody takes a video that was taken in Italy of a burning methane bus, and puts it out and says that it's the electric bus launched in Kenya burning in Karen. And so we are like, how is it? And the video was shared and it was viewed tens of thousands of times. And we are like, how is it possible all the mainstream media missed this? How is it possible that this person got it? And when you zoom, you just see pointers that surely this cannot be Karen. And thankfully, we have all these open source tools like Google Earth Pro, where you can get a satellite feed on what happens. So number one, just think, ask those questions, find out, okay, can I prove it for myself? If you can't, then you have to ask someone, like, where is the proof? It's the basic question that a lot of people are going to be misled right now. You will hear somebody will post on WhatsApp that so-and-so has said this. All you need to ask that person, where is the proof? And a lot of them, when they do that, they either have a manufactured or fabricated front page, or they have a faked video or an out of context video. So they will put that out. So if you see that, it's very easy. All you need to do is shout out at fact checkers, and like at AfricaCheck on Facebook and the IG, you will find us and we will tell you whether it's true or not. So if you do all that and you still are not sure, then it's, what would it cost you not to share misinformation? Like, do you have to share everything you receive? So those are some of the things. But usually, if it makes you angry or it makes you very happy, just check yourself. That's the point where we also tell people, stop, reflect, and verify on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's, I think, that's our show for today. How can people keep up with you and the work you do at AfricaCheck? Where can they either find you or get to know a bit more about what you're up to with your team?
So you can find us on AfricaCheck.org. AfricaCheck.org. Just type that in your browser. You will come to your website. You can find us on Twitter at AfricaCheck and at AfricaCheck_KE. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, AfricaCheck at AfricaCheck_KE. And we are also on TikTok at AfricaCheck. And lastly, we are on WhatsApp. So the WhatsApp number is 0729 305650. And you can shoot us a question, whether you want something checked or whether you want to delete something from online and you think it's like banning you, it's bad. So we will have a look and tell you whether it's a factual or not.
Awesome. And that's our show for today. This is the Stop, Reflect, Verify podcast. And you can keep up with us on our social media handles, and hopefully you'll be catching this on a social network somewhere. You might catch this on YouTube, or you might be listening to this on the audio version of the podcast. But I've been really excited and happy to have Alphonce Shiundu here, the Kenya editor of AfricaCheck. And there are more episodes of the Stop, Reflect, Verify podcast if this is your first one that you've heard. And I hope to hear from you as we get to the election and the post-election period. Be sure to share, like, subscribe. You know what to do. Hit the notification bells. I won't give you the whole spiel from YouTubers, but my thing is, just if this mattered to you, if a moment in here made you think, pause, made you stop, reflect, verify, please keep up with what Alphonce and his team are doing. Please take the quiz if you haven't at StopReflectVerify.com and pass this on. This is one of the great things where you're actually doing a bit of good work by spreading and sharing this to your friends, family, colleagues, and the people you care about. So thank you and bye for now.